Is raising the minimum wage a solution to poverty, or does it create more problems? Supporters argue that higher wages help workers afford basic necessities, reducing reliance on government aid. But opponents warn that businesses may cut jobs or raise prices to compensate. With inflation and cost of living rising, the debate is more relevant than ever. What do you think? Should the government step in, or should wages be left to the market? Supporters of raising the minimum wage argue that it boosts the economy by increasing workers' purchasing power. When people earn more, they spend more, driving demand for goods and services. This, in turn, can lead to job growth and business expansion. But is it that simple? Some economists warn that higher wages could lead to inflation, making everything more expensive. Can the economy truly benefit from a mandated wage increase? Opponents argue that raising the minimum wage forces businesses to cut jobs or reduce hours. Small businesses, in particular, may struggle to afford higher wages, leading to layoffs or even closures. Automation also becomes more attractive when labor costs rise. If wages increase too much, could we see more self-checkout machines and fewer human workers? Is there a balance between fair wages and keeping jobs available? Some states and cities have taken matters into their own hands, setting their own minimum wages higher than the federal level. Places like California and New York have significantly higher wages than states that stick to the federal minimum. But does this create an uneven playing field? Businesses in high-wage states may struggle to compete with those in lower-wage areas. Should there be a national standard, or should states decide for themselves? One argument against raising the minimum wage is that it could hurt young and inexperienced workers. If businesses have to pay more, they may be less willing to hire entry-level employees. This could make it harder for teenagers and new workers to gain experience. On the other hand, should people be expected to work for wages that don't cover basic living expenses? How do we balance fair pay with job opportunities? Some studies suggest that moderate increases in the minimum wage don't lead to significant job losses. In fact, in some cases, businesses adapt by improving efficiency or raising prices slightly. But how high is too high? If wages rise too quickly, could businesses struggle to keep up? The key may be finding a balance, raising wages enough to help workers without causing unintended economic consequences. Where should that balance be? Inflation is another major factor in this debate. If wages rise, but prices rise even faster, are workers really better off? Some argue that increasing wages fuels inflation, making everything more expensive. Others say that wages have lagged behind inflation for years, and workers need a raise just to keep up. Is raising the minimum wage a real solution, or does it just shift the problem elsewhere? The federal minimum wage in the U.S. has remained at $7.25 per hour since 2009. Adjusted for inflation, that wage buys far less today than it did back then. Some argue that it's long overdue for an increase, while others say businesses should set wages based on market demand. Should the government regularly adjust the minimum wage for inflation, or should wages be left to competition? Some countries have no minimum wage at all, relying on market forces to determine pay. Others have much higher minimum wages than the U.S. and still maintain strong economies. What can we learn from other nations? Does a higher minimum wage always lead to job losses, or can it coexist with economic growth? Looking at global examples might help us find the best approach for the U.S. One alternative to raising the minimum wage is expanding tax credits like the Earned Income Tax Credit, EITC. This helps low-income workers without directly increasing labor costs for businesses. But is this a better solution, or just a way to shift the burden from employers to taxpayers? Should businesses be responsible for paying higher wages, or should the government step in to help low-wage workers? Some argue that instead of raising wages, we should focus on job training and education. Higher skills often lead to higher-paying jobs, reducing the need for a minimum wage increase. But not everyone has access to affordable education or training programs. Should the government invest more in workforce development? Or is raising wages the more immediate solution? What's the best way to help low-income workers? Big corporations like Amazon and Target have voluntarily raised their minimum wages above the federal level. Some argue that if large companies can afford it, all businesses should follow suit. But small businesses don't have the same resources as corporate giants. Should wage laws be different for small businesses, or should all employers be held to the same standard? How do we ensure fairness for both workers and businesses? The debate over minimum wage laws isn't just about economics, it's also about fairness. Should someone working full-time still struggle to afford rent and food? Or should wages be determined purely by supply and demand? There's no easy answer, but the discussion affects millions of workers. What do you think? Should the minimum wage be raised, or would that do more harm than good? The minimum wage debate will continue, but one thing is clear, it affects everyone. Whether you're a worker, business owner, or consumer, wage policies shape the economy. What's your take? Should the government raise the minimum wage, or should the market decide? Let us know in the comments. And if you found this discussion interesting, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more thought-provoking content.